Look, I've been at the grocery store. I've been at a restaurant. This has happened several times, right? Where just random people will walk up to me and say, dude, I'm just psyched that you're out here like at the grocery store doing your own thing. Like if I was in your situation, I just don't know like what I would do. And I just kind of give them the thumbs up and like, I'm glad you're here too, like doing your thing. But I think in their mind, they think they have it better than me. And I'm not sure if that's true.
This is Andrew Petty is Dying, where we tap into the power of our mortality to become the people we were made to be and live the lives we were made to live. I'm your host, Andrew Petty, and I'm dying. I hate to say it, but so are you. For all of us intent on becoming the person we were made to be and living the lives we were made to live with guts, gusto, and abandon, this episode is a must listen. 30 years ago, Ryan Baker died a, quote, little death. Little, only in the sense that it didn't signify his final departure from this life. In every other sense, though, it was a death indeed, and it permanently divided his life into before and after. Ryan lives every day now with the physical results of that little death and the emotional pain that goes with it. And it's from that crucible that Ryan has acquired insights for living that all of us need to hear. Through the lens of his story, Ryan blows up conventional notions of, quote, disability to help us diagnose and treat our own disabilities more clearly, teaches us how to avoid victimy frames of mind and stay in the driver's seat of our lives, reveals the danger of expectations, and a whole lot more. Ryan is a native of California and with his wife, Kelly, now splits time between California and Steamboat Springs, Colorado. He's a lifelong athlete, an innovator, a podcaster, coach, and mentor. Without further ado, I'm thrilled to introduce you to my new friend, Ryan Baker, and his hard-won wisdom for living. Thankfully, we don't have to go where Ryan has gone to benefit from the lessons he's learned. This conversation challenged and encouraged me big time. And without a doubt, there's something in this episode that can change your life if you'll let it. Ryan, when you were 19, you suffered an injury that left you paralyzed at the 6th thoracic vertebrae. What does that mean for all of us who don't understand the nature of that injury and what it causes?
Yeah, so I'm paralyzed. I have complete use of my hands and arms and my pecs and my lats. But everything, let's say, from about the sternum down is, literally paralyzed. I was in an automobile accident the day after I graduated from high school. I was a passenger. The driver fell asleep behind the wheel. I was already asleep in the vehicle. We were in a full-size van. I was laying prone on my stomach on top of a sleeping bag, wearing my board shorts and a t-shirt, leaving Southern California to come to Steamboat Springs, Colorado in June of 1991.
So let's see, the total elapsed time then with this injury is, what are you going on, 30 years now?
I just celebrated 30 years back in June.
Okay.
Yeah, I woke up on the scene, driver broke their ankle, and I felt totally normal. Physically, I didn't really feel like there was anything wrong with me. I just went to get up and couldn't move. There was an off-duty EMT who saw the saw the accident. It was just a light, we rear-ended someone basically, and it was just enough to throw me into the engine cover and compress my spine at the thoracic 6.
So if I'd driven by and seen people on scene, I wouldn't have thought much about that accident,
not.
Would I? It wouldn't have looked catastrophic in any way.
No, it was not catastrophic at all, really. I mean, other than the result of the paralysis. But as far as car accidents go, people have probably walked away from much worse, for sure.
What is that like to know that it was such a simple incident, but yet the effects have been just obviously completely life-changing for you?
Yeah, it has. It's changed my life. I mean, paralysis is a crazy injury to sustain. There's a lot of change, of course. Part of what I've learned so far, or at least dealing with that initial catastrophic onset, was, I guess, my my age, being athletic, being a little gregarious and probably a little extroverted. And with that, and a part of my defense mechanism was complete naivete, right, to the injury.
Are you suggesting that in a sense your youth, your relative ignorance about these kinds of things was useful?
Almost played to my advantage.
Okay.
I mean, I knew what the injury was. I guess I just didn't really understand at the time what it meant, right?
Yeah, how could you have? I mean,
Yeah, that's the learning curve right
Yeah.
there. Is getting into it, learning again, how to get dressed, how to drive, how to poop, how to pee, how to develop self-confidence, how to figure out and negotiate a world really that isn't necessarily designed for someone in a wheelchair.
that confidence piece is interesting. It's something I'd love to come back to a little bit later on. So you're 19, and you've shared with me before that you were you said you were hyper athletic. I mean, just
Yeah.
always on the move, a great athlete, just really enjoyed everything sport related. And here you are 19, suddenly that thing that you enjoyed and the way that you'd enjoyed it wasn't available to you any longer. I mean, just like the shock of that is mind blowing to me. So I want to know, what was the darkest moment after your injury and how did you get out of it?
Yeah.
And that could be any time, obviously, in that 30-year time span, because I don't know that
Sure.
it occurred right near it or what, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, initially you go through these stages, of course. I mean, I didn't really have any illusions about recovery as far as walking again. I knew that the paralysis was going to be like a permanent deal for me.
and the medical team had made that clear from the beginning.
I just didn't have any illusions about that, really. I just kind of thought, all right, this is the nature of the injury. I've seen the x-ray. It was literally like a compression where my vertebrae became like an accordion, essentially. I knew, after the fact, I spent about 6 days in ICU. I had surgery on my back to stabilize my spine. I kind of knew after some of these things had occurred that there wasn't really like a going back opportunity. Not in the way that, you would recover from, let's say, like a broken leg or maybe even like an ACL injury. It was permanent. So as far as like the darkest part, gosh, I think one of the toughest things right away was just having so much life, right, and experience. You get habitual about things, getting dressed, getting showered. We were talking earlier about having a routine, I just had to sort of like relearn my routine. And that took a long time. It was a lot of, pee in the pants, poop in the pants, a lot of falling out of the chair, maybe. I'd go to physical therapy, but then I'd kind of tell myself, I can do all this stuff at home. Like, I just sort of became, or tried to use my athleticism, some of that motivation to not let the injury, I guess, completely overwhelm me. However, a big part of that is a defense mechanism because I'm trying to like escape it, maybe mentally, probably emotionally, certainly spiritually.
Why do you say certainly spiritually?
Because, I feel like, again, when you're 19 and you have this sort of expectation about what your life might be or the direction it might go. And then it's, I don't even know really how to explain it, Andrew. It's like you're working on a painting, you're sculpting something, and then someone just comes and like kicks it over. And so part of, I'm gonna try and say this without getting too emotional.
Take your time.
The lesson, I guess, is being able to take that knocked over statue that you've kind of been working on your whole life and be able to like start over.
Does that reassemble the old statue, or does that make a new one?
No, that's the difference. Yeah. And that's what I'm getting at. The alternative is to sit there and try and like piece back together what's been broken. And, broken, it could be, I feel like it could be whatever the individual decides, right? Like for me, it was about rebuilding. And that's what I think, hopefully, try and instill like into others, right? Some of the hard stuff comes in I guess, letting go of the old statue, not feeling, or like letting go of some of the guilt that comes along with not being able to reassemble it. Right?
Guilt.
I mean, like you want to get back to what you had, you want to get back to like normal. You sort of want to get back to, I don't know, there's like just the pressure of trying to like reassemble something that's been broken and clinging to that versus understanding that really what needs to be done is just starting over and rebuilding. That's the message. But that's also the hardest part. I mean, look at me. I'm a mess. I still deal with stuff. It's still an incredible loss, but I'm not consumed by the injury. I don't think about recovery as walking again. Mm-hmm. That's not what being healed looks like to me. So I guess like that's a very long-winded way of saying that some of the hardest part for me has been just that, that reassembly process. Some of it I'm still working on.
I was going to ask, is that ongoing or was
that?
Yeah,
some of it I still deal with, I still work on, I still think about. And then there are other things that I feel like are, again, pretty routine, a little mundane perhaps. And I think by and large, the wheelchair community, like right now, I know we're past it, but September is like Spinal Cord Injury Awareness Month. And I just think about the people that are in a spot where they just want to live their life without feeling like they have to be an inspiration,
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's possible, I mean, I don't know what people think. Well, I mean, I know I've seen reactions. I've seen people have, held doors open for me and not held doors open for me. And I feel completely indifferent about it. I don't feel like one person is being polite where one person isn't, or sensitive, and one person isn't sensitive or thoughtful.
That consideration isn't as much on your radar screen as people like me who are fully mobile might think it is.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
because you're so interested in moving into a let's disregard the chair. Let's interact with the person. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I want to just sort of, and I would hope other people in my position just want to live as normal, whatever that looks like to you, as possible, with as few barriers to entry as far as, access and stuff. I mean, I'm not a huge activist when it comes to, accessibility, but I'm for equal opportunity, of course. And, I found a lot of that through athletics and sports. And part of, I think, what played into my hand also was being injured at a younger age. That allowed me to sort of grow into the injury, mature a little bit into my life while I'm dealing with the injury and sort of recovering from that.
Yeah, you lived more of your life with it than without it.
Correct. Yeah. And again, that's going to be horrible and shocking for some. And for others, it's just a marker. I just want to work, have friends, have a recreational kind of like work life balance. We're not going to have kids. I'm married. But we tried for kids a number of years ago, struck out a few times, and just sort of, came to terms with the fact that that's just not in the plan for us, which is fine. That doesn't weigh heavy on us. I'm kind of in this great spot where I just sort of feel like the universe is unfolding for me just as it should.
Awesome.
That's not to say it's been without its peaks and valleys and whatever, but we all deal with that. And I think I have a really good understanding and a kind of a realist view that one man's floor is another man's roof kind of philosophy, and life is unfair. And I saw something the other day that, like, a little phrase, and it just said, life isn't happening to you. Life is responding to you. And I thought, that's so cool. I mean, we're just sort of like making the bed, that we're laying in here.
How did you emerge from that darkest time when you were first learning to rebuild and you were becoming aware of what that would mean and what that was going to take? And I'm mindful too that your family was in the picture too, and they're also involved in the loss you're experiencing and helping you through it. So I'm wondering, what was the ecosystem like, and how did you find your way through that darkest time into kind of the next chapter of?
Yeah. Well, thank God for my family, right? And my friends. I had incredible support that way, which I'm very fortunate and incredibly blessed to have had that at that time. Not a lot of people have that. And I recognize that, that was a huge part of it for me. Again, being young, just out of high school, having that kind of family unit support was critical for me, But I was lucky in that we had a tight family unit, I do come from a broken home. My parents divorced when I was 8, or, quite young. Sort of grew up a little quicker than maybe most. Again, that's why I think I was involved in so many different sports and always on the move, because mom was working or I was, spending weekends with dad, but I had to stay busy.
Yeah.
And the family, the friends, it was an interesting dynamic. And I like that word ecosystem that you used, because it certainly presented a shift in our environment. It was equally as difficult for my family and my friends. A lot of my friends, again, right out of high school, the natural course of life, people are just going to sort of separate, But I have a really good hardcore group of friends that I've been close with since middle school. And we're, there's 8 or 10 of us or whatever that are still quite close, even after 30 years. Again, I feel like that's maybe a little unusual, and I'm very lucky that way to have a really great network of friends. It was an interesting dynamic with my family, however, because we were moving up here, together to live in Steamboat. We owned a business up here as a family. The plan, again, like, you just have these expectations and these thoughts about the path that your life is on. And then you just, I had a detour thrown in my way, and my path and my family's path, went a different direction. And I had no idea, of course, like what was to come, what was happening, or like what to anticipate, I should say. How can you anticipate anything like that? But it certainly shifted what our priorities as a family. And looking back, I guess I'm fortunate in that my family wasn't super easy on me. I mean, there was I think an appropriate amount of like tough love, letting me sort of like fail and figure it out, because, I'm not going to live at home forever. I don't want to be that kind of person where I became dependent on others because of my paralysis. I knew enough. I'd been around enough as far as, going through rehab, meeting other guys, meeting women in chairs that were doing great things, having kids, having families, jobs, going to school, driving, being independent, living life abundantly, basically. And I just thought, and I just knew that my injury level and my amount of function would give me the opportunity to accomplish kind of whatever I wanted still. It was just going to be a different way of going about doing that, doing those things, whatever that became, right? Initially it was athletic, how to get back up on the mountain, skiing, hitting the tennis ball. I got a racing chair and was competing in little 10Ks and stuff just to, again, it was like the wheelchair community is its own culture, the degrees of separation are pretty small. And so I just kind of threw myself into that and immersed myself into that community. And I just kind of figured out, if this guy's doing it, I can do it. And it was also an incredible way to learn from other people how they were doing things that I could benefit from, getting in and out of the car, or getting dressed, traveling. How do they, deal with getting on and off of an airplane and, just life stuff.
Yeah.
For me, that was recovery, right? That felt normalizing and empowering.
How do you avoid the victim pity party and stay in the driver's seat of your life? Because it's a situation where, in fact, you were victimized by an event outside of your control. And if you wanted to stay there and play there and just kind of sit, soak, and sour, you could. So how did you and how are you continuing to stay out of that victim pity party and stay in the driver's seat?
My initial response to that, Andrew, would be my family would never allow that. And there's a certain sense of this accountability to each other.
Your family specifically?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that we're, I don't know. It was just you're just going to figure this out kind of thing.
I first heard it from Jordan Peterson, but I'm sure it's just sort of standard fare in psychology. But he said, whatever someone can do, they should do, and they should do for themselves.
Yeah.
It has so many applications, whether it's in child rearing or whatever. If I'm always taking my son's plate from the table to the kitchen for him, then there's no need for him to ever learn to do that, which of course sets him up for some level of failure as an adult.
Yeah.
And it sounds like your family embodied that to a T. They said, whatever you can do, you are going to do, even if it's hard.
Sure.
And that has put you on a track to embracing the same mindset as you relate to yourself and this injury later as an adult, that it didn't allow you this rancid soil where you could develop some of those seeds of self-pity and stuff.
I'd never really allowed myself to get into that space, or I try not to. I mean, I certainly go through seasons of that. I feel like short, little spurts where, gosh, there are just certain situations, my wife would be really good at this, right? Because again, being married and having a relationship, our dynamic and where we can go, what we can do is very different than the typical couple. So there are things that happen that will shine a spotlight on the disability and sort of slap you in the face with it. Like, newsflash, you're paralyzed. Even though you feel like you've been in control, dominating, there's been not a lot of speed bumps recently. And then out of nowhere, boom, it's like, holy crap. I'm not going to be able to go on that hike with her, or I'm not going to be able to do this zipline course with my friends. It's not just events with loved ones. It's other things too,
So there's moments that hit you on a fairly regular basis where you kind of are aware.
Yeah. Like, holy crap, this is real.
Yeah.
And I've got to figure out how to negotiate, cope, kind of manage it, deal with it, accept it. And, I don't really like this, but like lean into it, right? And sort of like move on.
Coachy talking.
I hate that term.
What does it mean exactly?
Yeah. But sort of just like sit with it, right? And like allow myself to be angry about it. That's okay. I think that we should all be in a place mentally and emotionally where we are doing what we're capable of doing. I see people in my community that do not take advantage of their function, and then I see other people
In the wheelchair community.
yes,
Yeah.
that don't really like take advantage of their function. They sort of use their disability as a weapon maybe, or to have other people do things for them, which is inappropriate and unhealthy. It's not going to get you anywhere. You're sort of just running in place at that point. And no, that's not to be meant. I just sort of said that, but that's not doing anything for you.
Yeah.
I see guys that sustain spinal cord injuries and then get recovery, and they can sort of stand up and they can not walk. I'll call it like a drunken stumble, stagger, if they're leaning up against something. I've got friends that can stand up out of their chair, put their chair in the back of their truck, and then sort of use the side of the vehicle to get to the driver's seat, right? If someone has that ability and they're not doing it, then shame on you. I just feel like this is something I feel a little like this is something totally different than the injury talk.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it can speak to all areas of life. And
Because there are plenty of people that are fully mobile who are not doing what they can.
of course,
And part of what we're here to do on this show is to wake people up to their potency and their power and their potential in the world, and encourage them to take responsibility for that. And
yeah,
there's so much crossover in what you're saying. You're wrestling with any moments of victimy kinds of stuff that would be very easy to slide into, and making decisions to move forward anyway into what you can do and stay less focused on what you can't do.
right.
I mean, that transfers across this disability boundary that exists between people like you and people like me.
Sure.
Because there are people who are fully physically mobile and mentally and emotionally disabled,
Correct.
and not doing what they can do.
Yeah.
And
I mean, look, I've been at the grocery store. I've been at a restaurant. This has happened several times, right? Where just random people will walk up to me and say, dude, I'm just psyched that you're out here like at the grocery store doing your own thing. Like if I was in your situation, I just don't know like what I would do. And I just kind of give them the thumbs up and like, I'm glad you're here too, like doing your thing. But I think in their mind, they think they have it better than me. And I'm not sure if that's true. And
say more about that. What does that mean?
Well, the optics and the perception of the disability are very different than, I guess, again, getting back to taking advantage of your function and what you want to do and accomplish and how you do that. But there are plenty of people out there that are highly functional, what we would call able-bodied people. I hate that term too. But there are certain ideologies, barriers that people have that they just sort of dress themselves with, and then they're just unwilling to take it off. Or someone puts it on them and they don't know how to like shed it, right?
Yeah, and sometimes I think we're not even aware that we're wearing it.
Right.
Because
I would agree with that.
We either put it on early enough or it was put on to us early enough that we lack awareness that we're walking around with this mental, emotional, or whatever other kind of disability.
Yeah. I just did a show where I talked a little bit about being orderly and how if you don't take care of your stuff and like leave the Amazon box in the corner, it will just sort of become a part of the landscape. And then you just forget about it and it just lives there. And I feel like that is very much the same with some of our attitudes, behaviors, and our perceptions about how we, kind of interpret other people's experience, how we like profile, especially someone with a disability when the nature of their limitation or whatever you want to say is so incredibly obvious, right? But that doesn't mean that I'm just going to want to trade places with you. I don't know anything about who this person is or who they are, what they're doing, their addictions, their crazy kids, their wife. But there's this illusion that because of the disability, they have it better than someone in the chair, And again, as far as the disabled community goes, I'm highly functional. Like within our own little cohort, I'm essentially an able-bodied person. I mean, there are plenty of people out there operating power chairs that need assistance, getting in and out of bed, in and out of the shower. And I'm in awe and, frankly, a little taken back by like, how do those people get on with it? Again, that's their own experience. One man's floor is another man's roof. And there's just no way around that part of life. I don't know why, like we spoke earlier about the level of my injury. I very easily could have been what is considered a quadriplegic due to how I was injured. It could have very easily been my neck or something higher that would have, essentially relegated me to a power chair, and little to no use of my hands or dexterity, being able to tie my shoes, things like that. Having that kind of function is a huge blessing. And just recognizing the differences between what I can do, what someone else deals with, and how that experience is totally different, But yeah, I think in large part, back to that initial, I wouldn't want to trade places with you or whatever. I just feel like there's an idea out there that people live with regarding what it means to live with a disability. And that, that's going to be different for everybody based on their own experience and what they've seen, like diversity and inclusion right now is all the rage, right? I mean, you're seeing more coverage on television, for example, for like the Paralympic Games. More companies are starting to use and employ people with disabilities in their advertising and collateral, So it's becoming more accepted that, there's a community of people out there. And it's not just paralysis, right? It's cerebral palsy, it's deaf, blind, there's all kinds of different mobility impairments that people are living with. Again, people have this idea about what it is to live with a disability. How do you drive? How do you have sex? How do you get married and maintain a relationship? Like, how do you put yourself in a position where you allow yourself to be loved and you make yourself lovable, right? Like,
and I'll confess, all of those questions and more I have in my own heart and mind.
Sure.
And so thank you for giving us access into your heart and mind to help us appreciate what it looks like from your vantage point.
Well, the danger here is taking these preconceived notions about what it is to live with a disability and then sustain the injury, or a loved one sustains the injury, and you just heap all of these preconceived notions onto that person or onto yourself about what it is to live with an injury. And that's when it can become anesthetizing, dangerous, to be complacent, to feel like, because I'm paralyzed now, like I don't drive. I shouldn't drive. That's crazy talk. Like, how am I going to get in and out of the car and drive a car by myself with this wheelchair? Like, there are ways to do that, of course, but when you go into the injury with these ideas, that in itself is paralyzing. And it's the same way, right? With relationships, family, raising children, maybe. I don't know about that. You could probably speak more to that. But friendships and sports, accountability, teamwork, those are all different essential functions, I think, for what we want to be like a successful, abundant life.
Sounds like you were really served well by your family in those very early years, such that you realized that whatever you could do, you were going to have to do for yourself. And I think this is a huge takeaway for all of us, whether we're dealing with a mobility challenge or not, dealing with the other challenges we're trying to touch on that can exist in our hearts and minds that handicap us from becoming who we can be and living the lives we were made to live.
Yeah.
Is number one, speaking to myself and everyone else listening, if there's things that you can do, then it's up to you to do them.
Yeah.
Don't lean on other people around you for that. If there's things that you really can't do or need assistance doing, great, lean on other people for that. But take radical responsibility for yourself. And then for those of us who are in committed friendships, marriage, parents, whatever it might be sure to let those people do what they can do and not do for them. Because you really limit a person and serve a person poorly when you come alongside and try to make sure they're okay and in a sense rescue them.
Yeah.
Am I hearing that right? Would you agree with that?
I would. And here's an example that I'll tell you about, which I sort of was able to, I guess, because of my family and because I was trying to take notice and recognize my new environment and the people that were living successfully in it, right, is, again, the idea of having the disability and sort of some of the, I guess, aids that you need to, like, I sit on a shower bench in the shower. Okay, fine, because I'm not going to sit on the floor of a tub. I want to sit like a little higher off the ground, have a handheld hose, shower massager thing, and I transfer in and out of the shower onto my shower bench. Well, again, if you think you're not going to be able to make that transfer, people will literally like redesign their whole bathroom so they can roll in and out of the shower in a different chair that they use for the shower. And they leave rehab with all of this stuff, right? Stuff for the bathroom, stuff to help them get in and out of bed. One of the most important things that I got when I left rehab was this piece of plywood called a slide board. And it helps you get from your chair to bed or from the chair to the car.
Like a bridge almost.
Like a bridge.
Yeah.
And, eventually the idea is you wean yourself off of it. But people will become dependent on the slide board, or they become dependent on other types of, aids that they need, or that they don't need, but they believe that they need them and they never really grow out of them. Mm-hmm. And then they become...
That's the key right there. You said they believe that they need them.
Right. And they don't grow out of it. And then they become dependent on it. And again, letting go of that, kind of overcoming this fear, that you can or can't make the transfer or whatever that is for you. That's a huge thing. Like, too much of a good thing can be like, look, man, I love apple pie. You talk to my mom, my family, like they know I will crush some apple pie. But if you told me I had to eat it every day, I would not want that. It would not be, what I would want it to be. And I feel like there's a balance between what we find acceptable as far as like getting things done on our own and finding that place. Here's, the other thing that I'll speak to, or what I wanted to say based on what you were just talking about, is if you just do these things for yourself, whatever that is, whatever that looks like for you, I guarantee it will be really empowering. And I think in large part that gets lost on people, that they forget how good it feels to sort of have these small victories. Because look, you have to eat the elephant one bite at a time, right? You should not expect yourself to go out there and accomplish whatever you want to do in like just one fell swoop. You have to be a disaster before you become the master.
Well said. I hope everyone listening really is hearing what you're saying, and I want to just add to that we're capable of so much more than we know. And some of you out there may be doubting that about yourselves. And I hope you'll hear in Ryan's story and from his experience, the exhortation to realize that you're capable of more than you know, and to be willing to be a disaster before you're the master. I think it was Carl Jung who said, the fool is the precursor to the hero. And in mythology, that kind of bears out over time that the fool becomes the hero. In order to become the hero, you have to be willing to venture into the unknown with great uncertainty and fear and trepidation, but take that one step into the unknown. And just as soon as you do that, you're a little less foolish than you were the moment before.
Yeah.
And you're a little bit more heroic than you were the moment before.
And it will build self-confidence. It will be edifying to your soul.
Yeah. And so we undermine ourselves, I think is what you're saying. Like, right?
Well, I think
we fail to empower ourselves. We diminish ourselves by not.
Correct. That's it. I think we do not give ourselves credit for understanding the possibilities, right? Like it's harder to see the little victories or to take on the things that we feel might be a little more intense. We're putting them off. We don't want to take that on, or making that transfer, learning how to drive, achieving a goal is going to be incremental, and every little step should be considered a small victory. That's what I think. Mm-hmm. I also think that we forget how resilient we are.
Yeah.
How much abuse and punishment, physically, mentally, emotionally. I mean, I've met people, Andrew, that have been through some crazy stuff. I've met guys in chairs that how they get injured, there is just no explanation for it. Literally, like a guy in the forest helping his dad clear trees, like on a dairy farm in upstate New York, and a tree fell on him. Like, how do you explain that? Like a woman driving down the road and a windstorm and another tree falls on her car and she dies instantly. Like, there's just no explanation for some of the things that life will throw at us, right? And those things tend to be like on the most random Tuesday morning when you least expect it or whatever. Yeah. But we should never forget how resilient we are, how we can rebound physically, but also like mentally and emotionally from different hardships, catastrophes, events, loss. I was a huge Norm Macdonald fan who just passed away recently, and he has this bit where look, I've never been interested in taking my own life, ever. It's not something that I believe in or whatever. But Norm had this bit where he was like talking about how, people will say to him or have said to him, God, I just don't know why or how people will kill themselves or whatever. And his response is, you don't? Like, what do you live in a cotton candy house or something? Like,
Right.
you don't understand like life's crazy, how it just like is full of catastrophe and ends in disappointment, basically, which is shocking and hilarious. And his brand of humor is a little blue, but I think it speaks to how we let an event happen to us, how life happens to us. And then I know it's cliche, but like, how are we responding to that event? I mean, it's all about the response, right?
And unfortunately, there seems to be within human nature this desire to find an out. How can I escape the full weight of the responsibility of my life? How can I somehow transfer my responsibility to a situation, to an injury, to another person? And when we do that, we diminish ourselves, because then we begin to move backwards. We're not moving forward any longer, becoming who we can be. When we encounter chaos in our lives, whether it's an injury like yours, loss of a loved one, loss of a job, there's always this opportunity to transfer the responsibility that is ours for the response that we have to the situation, to another person. And many around us would say, oh yeah, that's right and good. Oh, you poor thing. And I'm not downplaying the sympathies that people extend, but if they're overplayed and we really internalize them, oh, poor me, then out of that chaos, the chaos of that moment, there's no opportunity for order to arise and for us to, like my next guest on the podcast said, be the phoenix that rises out of the ashes and becomes something even greater than before. And that's one of the great misunderstandings I think we have in life as humans, is that these moments of adversity can be moments of greatness when we look back on them, even though none of us, I would think, would say, yeah, I'm glad that happened. Our response in that moment has everything to do with what that moment then means in our life moving forward.
I want to be able to, I guess, look back and just feel like I put in the effort to make the most of what I had.
Yeah.
That's all.
That's awesome.
I don't want to feel like, I should have, not even that I should have done something or done it differently, that I feel good about what I've done. I know that I sort of was able to do the most I could do with what I had within my control, right? The things that are out of our control, we can't camp out on those things and live thinking about the things. Even if it's a barrier for us that's out of our control, we've got to figure out how to let that go. I sometimes feel, Andrew, like I'm a car on a road at night with my headlights on, and I can just only see as far as the headlights will allow me to see.
Yeah.
And I have no idea like what is coming up in the next half mile because my headlights don't go that far.
Yeah.
And the road might turn. I don't know. I do know like where I'm going, right? I want to go to a destination. My headlights are not going to shine on the destination. Like when you drive home at night from the restaurant to your house, you can only see as far as your headlights will allow. And I like to think about my journey that way.
I love that. And it's so easy to try and overreach your headlights, to see what's around the corner.
Yeah. And the turn for our destination, we might want to go right, but for me, that road was blocked. I had to figure out a different way.
I know you got to hit the road here soon, and I've got a few questions that I had in mind that I kind of wanted to pick your brain about, but I'm going to pick the one that sticks out to be the most as we wrap up here.
Yeah.
And if there's another moment, I might have another one, but this is the one. I think this transitions well from what you were just saying. You mentioned in an earlier conversation that this injury has really forced you to learn to let go. What does that mean? And what do you think keeps more of us from letting go in the way that you mean?
Yeah. Okay. So I told you a story about a guy hiking who's on a trail and falls, and now he's hanging off a cliff, and he's by himself and he's hanging on for his life, and he's there for quite a while, and he starts to kind of scream for some help to the point where he's asking for help from God. The voice of God comes in, I'll help you. And the guy says, yeah, just, if you could help me, God, get a footing or give me a little boost to get back on the trail. And God says, if you want my help, if you want to really be free, just let go. And that analogy, that story, letting go of something that causes us, trepidation, you said earlier, the amount of effort that we put into hanging on to stuff, when ultimately it's just draining us, and we might not even really realize it because we want it so bad. Whatever that thing is, we're clinging to it, right? For me, the idea of the disability or the paralysis, I had to let go of the idea of walking again, right? I had to redefine what recovery was and what that meant for me.
Like you said earlier, what healing was.
What healing was, right? And what that looks like, not just physically, okay, I'm going to recover physically, but that means removing the idea that walking equates or equals being ambulatory. And part of that is me also understanding that even if I could ambulate and walk around a little bit, it's not going to be what it was, It'd be a painful slog of rehab and therapy and stretching my legs and, pain. And, it's been 30 years. I don't want to walk again. It's been too long. I have a routine. I understand my life. I know what it takes now. For me to walk again is not, but again, I had to let go of that idea. I had to let go of a lot of different things that came, with the injury. And I think in large part, Andrew, it speaks right into the theme of what you're doing, right? And kind of dying to different things in our life, whatever that might look like, letting go of things, relationships. I mean, even if I know it sounds crazy, but music, podcasts, friends, something you're eating, And again, it may not sound logical. It may not feel right initially, but it will be empowering and better in the long run.
And this feels so right to me. I mean, this is very much where I am in life right now, because I can get so bound up in certain things, and it's almost a physical experience and it's a mental and emotional one. And I'm learning to catch myself in those moments. And some of it, of course, has the anxiety edge to it that I experience, but it's also just this internal demand I have that things be a certain way. And if I just this or if I just that, then I can achieve the outcome that I'm looking for. And neither you nor I don't think would say, don't have things that you're shooting for. It's super useful and important to have things we're shooting for. But even as we're moving toward things that are desirable to us and that we want and that are valuable, to still be able to let go and to say that may or may not happen. And there's certain things I can do to influence that outcome. And there's a whole host of things that I can't do to influence that outcome. So how can I just be? It's not a passive being, it's an active being. But how can I, in the moment of pursuing something, also let go of the need for that thing to happen no matter what, or for a relationship to go a certain way, or for me to come off a certain way to people that I want to think well of me, or, for me, this podcast, I want the world to be listening to this podcast. But what if they don't?
The biggest form of disappointment is unmet expectation.
Yeah.
You have an expectation to achieve, to meet a goal, to accomplish something, to go on a vacation, let's say. It could be something, we have dinner reservations on Saturday night. And that's an expectation. And then something happens and you're not going to dinner anymore. That's an unmet expectation. When you feel like your life, or you're perceiving your life as a series of unmet expectations, dude, you are setting yourself up for incredible disappointment. If we can respond differently to those unmet expectations and figure out a way how, to turn them into something else, or understand that the unmet expectation is really just a part of the plan and not hang on to it again, like it has to be this idealistic, perfect thing that I've sort of built up in my mind, which sounds like a mutual influence of ours, Jordan Peterson, talks about a little bit, like the idea, like the power of thought and how incredible that can be, or debilitating, and how when our mind just takes over. Like right now, this is a little off topic, but I've applied for a new job and I'm waiting to hear back. And like, I just can't stop thinking about it. You know, I'm just consumed by like, am I going to get it? Am I not? And I'm forgetting about all the other things. And anyway,
man, I hate this because I know you've got to hit the road, and we could talk for hours. At least I could talk for hours. You might get sick of me, but I would love talking to you for hours. You're up to some really cool stuff in the world right now. And, it's evidence to me of the reality that our story and our purpose in the world are inseparable. What are you up to, and how can people connect with you?
Yeah. So one of the things I'm involved in, back in 2009, a friend of mine and I started a nonprofit called Wheelchair Lacrosse USA. There was no lacrosse option for disabled athletes, so we created one. I never played before my injury, but we created a rule book. And
that's so cool that you started playing a sport post-injury that you had never played pre-injury.
Yeah, well, and we created the environment for other disabled athletes to participate. Right. That's the whole thing. Like, I feel like this lacrosse thing is sort of a legacy for me to leave behind. Like, it's bigger than me. It's bigger than my friend Bill, who helped me start it. It's taken on a life of its own, and that's off and running and been incredibly fun and a huge blessing. I never would have done anything like that had I not been injured. Right.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't have been given the opportunity to do something like that. The other thing I'm involved in is not too indifferent, not too unlike what you're doing, coaching guys, women, families that are affected by spinal cord injury. And I offer a coaching service, and do efficiency training for newly injured guys and their families, individuals, I should say. It's largely men. I mean, let's be honest, out of every 100 spinal cord injuries, 80 are going to be male.
No kidding. I didn't know that.
Huh. Yeah. I mean, we're just risk takers and do more stupid things, But that's been a huge blessing for me also, just being able to give back to the community after 30 years of the knowledge and the experience that I have living with the injury. I have a podcast. It's called Twisted Spine. You can go to twistedspine.com to listen to the shows, check out the information, look at the services.
And I've listened, and I'm not obviously your target audience because I'm not suffering from a spinal cord injury, but man, I love your style. I love your heart. It all comes through. Obviously it is providing an amazing service.
It's hyper niche for sure. Cause it's, it's serving or intended for a pretty specific audience, but I like to cover all kinds of crazy topics, and there's really, nothing really that I won't talk about, really. So it's been fun. I love doing it, and I hope to keep it going for sure.
Well, thanks for serving the audience of this podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
And I was just thinking beforehand, like, how many times must you have told some part of that story? And I just wondered, do you just ever get sick of it? And even if you do, you were willing to do it today. Thank you for unpacking part of your story, going into the emotion, going into the vulnerability for all of our benefits, and serving us in this way, because what you've learned is an example to us. And for those of us who aren't dealing with spinal cord injuries, but are nonetheless disabled in other ways that are less apparent. The anxiety is one of those things for me, and I can easily crawl into a little victimy cave if I want to. But I can tell you that this conversation will encourage me whenever I sense the victimy cave coming on to be like, hell no, Petty. I mean, no, move forward. Don't move back. Focus on what you can do, not what you can't do. Make something of yourself.
Lean on other people if you need to, and find those areas where you can feel empowered by the small victories.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
And to everybody out there, remember, you are going to die, but you are not dead yet. So get after it. Ryan can't walk, but if you have ears to hear, he's more fully functioning and alive than many of us that can walk. How's that for mind-blowing? And to what nooks and crannies of your heart and mind has Ryan's story shown the light of revelation? What victimy tendencies or lifelong patterns have been exposed? Your heart is speaking to you, calling to you to step out of the shadows of victimhood and complacency and into the bright light of the full weight of your existence. To step courageously onto the path uniquely suited to you so you can achieve the purposes uniquely available to you. Today is all we've got. What are you waiting for? If you're new to this show, visit andrewpettyisdying.com to browse the archive of past interviews with fascinating people and short, topical solo episodes, all designed to equip you with the mindset and the means to become the person you are made to be and live the life you are made to live with guts, gusto, and abandon. We flipped the script by inviting our ancient foe, death, to become an unlikely ally in our heroic journey to leave it all out on the field of life. Turns out, mortality might just be the most potent motivator available, blasting us out of our ambivalence and complacency and into the fullness of our potential. Connect with me to learn more about how a powerful, confidential, one-on-one coaching partnership or participation in a graveyard group can help you live even more courageously and die regret-free. And I'm excited to share that the first ever women's graveyard group is launching soon too. Find me on Facebook or Instagram at Andrew Petty Coach, or email me at andrew@digdeepwinbig.com to learn more. I'm so glad you tuned in today. Don't forget to follow the show, and I'll see you next time on Andrew Petty is Dying.